Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day, and today we are here with a video on why I sold my one and only 71BIS, a recent sort of collection move that I have made that certainly wasn't easy, and one that, maybe I'll regret one day, I'm not quite sure. But ultimately, I felt it was right for me, and I wanted to share the story because, honestly, I don't talk a whole lot about my PC on here, mostly because, I share what I buy and what I have on my Instagram, is always linked down below to that. Vintage Discord as well, tons of fun stuff down there. But I felt like it was an interesting topic and one worthy of discussion, and the 71BIS was the biggest card I had in my collection, so it's a pretty monumental shift for me, and I want to talk through why that is, and would love to hear your thoughts as well. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about the details. So here it is. Here's what it was. This is on Fanatics Collect, where I decided to auction it off. It says the market value or the guide price is $13.2 thousand. The purchase price was $12.6. That's what it auctioned for. Little early because it hasn't been paid yet, but I assume it will be. And if not, I assume it will receive a similar number if it is reran. So I'm not all too worried by any means. And so this was the card. It was a BGS 7.5, and I had acquired this probably, if I had to guess, early to mid 2022. As you can see by the grade, 7.5. I thought it was a pretty good 7.5 as well. Doesn't appear trimmed to me. Seems overall pretty good. As you can tell, there's a corner down here, a little edge wear over here, but generally, in my opinion, a nice looking 7.5, if I do say so myself. And I guess before we go any further, I do want to state that this isn't a video talking down the 71BIS, saying that it isn't a good card or anything. I truly believe it's probably the most iconic soccer card, and I don't necessarily think it's all too close, but this wasn't some unattainable grade. A BGS 7.5 is probably on the lower end of BGS grades, given that BGS grades a little more loosely than PSA does, certainly now. PSA is extremely strict on these now, more so than they used to be. In addition to that, back in the day when people were grading with BGS more, there was a lot more better cards submitted there, so generally speaking they're pretty high grades, and so it's not like an unattainable grade. Beyond the card itself, we'll head on over to Card Ladder, where they have a bunch of very useful indexes, and as you can tell, over the last month, Messi and Maradona are near the top. These are my custom indexes, so this doesn't include everything, but includes what I felt were, somewhat meaningful cards that I could find on the Card Ladder site. And as we go on and look at the Messi graph all time, it's pretty telling of what's been going on here. So this is the Messi graph overall. If you want to see the cards in here, I'll just scroll through real quick, but it's a lot of the cards you'd imagine would be in here. And so almost all these are up pretty drastically, anywhere from, I guess there's a few, sort of random ones down here that are down, but most of these are up 100% all the way up to, 1,000%, granted. That's a Aqua Prism Refractor. So, a PSA 9 Monday Cremo's up 500%. Ultimately, Messi stuff is doing very, very well. And so that was certainly a major factor, right? I guess if we look over the last 2 years, I had bought it a little before this, but generally speaking, Messi was flat, not really moving up a whole lot. A little bit here and there, and certainly moved up a bit heading into this year. But the run-up we've seen since July to current moment has been just miraculous, really. The index value was, 30 to 40,000. This year it was 50,000 near the start, and now we're looking at 200,000. So clearly a drastic move upward, which was basically the whole reason I had sold this. This card was never something I bought with the intent of flipping in a year or two. It was always something I thought I was going to keep forever, or at least, until the time came where for some reason or another I decided to move it. It wasn't a short-term flip that I had planned out, but alas, it worked out that way. So why did it work out that way? What made me change? Well, this is the Pele index, and that was sort of, why. If you look here, clearly there's a big difference between the Pele index and the Messi index. The Messi index, I guess if we go all time, as you can see, peaked in 2021, came back down, and then has gone even higher than it was before. Meanwhile, the Pele index peaked in 2022, fell down, and has really stayed stagnant for probably, really the last year or two. There's a big sale here, probably a high-grade Alifa that caused it to drop a lot, but really a lot of the losses were already occurring in that time. And as you can see, it hasn't really gone anywhere. Over the last 2 years, it's down 53%. If we get that big sale out of here over the last year, it's down 5%. So, For me, I think no matter how you slice up who the best players of all time are, Pele and Messi are certainly in the top 3 or 4. And I think Pele is, along with Maradona, but I think Pele more so is the staple vintage soccer player for, essentially eternity in terms of where we stand at the moment and where we're going to go. So I thought, as someone that's been getting more and more into vintage, that I wanted to get some Pele. And, given this price graph and the movement upwards during 2022 into 2023, I could never afford Pele. It always seemed like something I'd want to do eventually, but it wasn't really reasonable. And with this massive drop, along with the huge Messi spike, it actually was something that I could, move some things into and actually, get going on. And so I decided to do that. Here are the cards in this index, just for reference. A lot of Aquarellas, basically every card that Card Ladder has in their index, which isn't a lot, but I just put them all in here. And that sort of shows you where we're at over the last year. The highest selling or the highest moving are some of the higher grade Aquarellas. And I bought a couple Pele rookies, a low grade Titulares, a decent grade Vav, a low grade Vav. I dabbled, but I never really went all too deep into it. And with this Messi sale, I was able to get what I felt were some fairly meaningful cards. So this is the Aquarella from 1958 in an authentic altered grade. The slab only says authentic with an auto 9, but it's authentic altered, as you can tell here. It doesn't have the perforated edges. It's been cut out, presumably from the album or in whatever manner. And this was the first one I decided to buy. Reason being, as it loads here, I've always wanted an Aquarella, but I've always felt weird about the numbered grades on them with the perforated edges. I never really felt comfortable getting a higher grade. And truthfully, in modern, autographs on cards are huge. It's a massive deal. And even in other spaces, vintage autos are a massive deal as well. When you look at baseball and you look at what those autographs do and how, hard to obtain they are, for someone like Pele, a rookie signed, well, not signed, but released 70 years ago and signed in a nice blue pen with a very clear signature, not a shaky signature, I just felt really good about it. I thought that, it's an item or a type of item that maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, I don't really feel I could attain then, but I had the chance to now, and so I wanted to go ahead and do that as I felt that it would be best for my collection and sort of where I'm going here. So clearly the cut, isn't ideal. Would you rather have it cut or not? I mean, obviously I would rather have one with the perforated edges. That doesn't really help at all. But at the same time, the autograph, the clean pen without the shakiness of the older autographs he did, made this a very clear-cut card that I wanted to add to the collection, and I was able to manage this for about $3,000, which certainly is a considerable amount, but I mean, it's around the same price like a PSA 2 or 3 goes for. And would I rather have an authentic auto grade with a clean pen or a PSA 2 or 3? I mean, for me, it was pretty clearly a autographed card. I know it's not everyone's thing, and clearly this move wasn't meant to please everyone. It was meant to please myself and my collection, and ultimately I thought that was a pretty great way of going about it. In somewhat of a boring manner, I doubled up on it, and I actually got another one for $3,000 as well. I like the cut on this a bit better. Ultimately, they're graded authentic, altered. If we could look down here, it would extend beyond authentic, and it would say altered, but if I ever really cared enough, I could cut it again myself and make it much cleaner, but I mean, really, I don't have much desire to do so. And as well with this one, I managed to get this for around $3,000 as well. So for a quarter of the price of my 71BIS, I was able to grab one of these, and for half the price of my 71BIS, I was able to grab two. And in a world where there's, 1,000 71BIS graded, maybe 1,500, depending on how many have been regraded or whatnot, these felt much more meaningful to me. I looked at the Pele autograph choices, and ultimately I think it added up to like 100 or 150 rookies that he had signed. Many of them sort of in-action shots. Not many of them were portraits like this Aquarella. And within that subsect, a lot of them were shaky, Sharpie autos. So for me, I felt really good about both of these purchases. I think that they make great pieces for my collection. And, to get two of them for half the price of the 71BIS felt like a pretty clear-cut move to be made for me. And finally, the last one that I was able to get was this 1958 Bremer Fock ring, more commonly known as the Crying Pele card. This is from the Bremer Coffee set out of Germany, one of which has many sort of in-action shots, and this is a pretty clear-cut favorite amongst the community at large, considering the moment. Of course, this comes after Pele defeats Sweden. Well, Brazil defeats Sweden, but Pele also contributed 2 goals and was a very key player within that tournament at the age of 17. Just a massive moment for him and for the soccer world at large, as it would turn out. And this had always been a card that I wanted in my collection, almost in any grade, really. It was one that I had always sort of circled as something to focus on. And I had taken attempts at getting them before in lower grade, but never came up successful. This appeared on a Fanatics Premiere. I was not able to get on Fanatics Premiere in time. You have to get pre-approved and all that stuff. Luckily enough, the winner of it then went and relisted it on eBay. Not long after, I sort of talked to him about it, and he said essentially that he was just trying to get out for near the cost he had bought it for because he had something else he wanted to go after, and I was happy to oblige. So I reached out on eBay, we got a deal off eBay, and ultimately I was able to get this as well, which for me was massive. The PSA 7 grade is a pop 104 with one higher. The one higher is a 7.5. So it's one of the highest grades that is out there at this moment, and it's not something that's popping up all too much anymore at all, really. I think the gem rate shows that there's only been 1, maybe 2 graded in the last year or two, so, they're really rare at the moment, and in this sort of a grade also, I just felt like it was something I certainly wanted, and as you can see there, market price says 5.5K. I paid closer to 6, and I was fine with that. But ultimately, these are the 3 items from Pele that I swapped my Messi 71BIS for. Looking back on it, I wouldn't really change a thing. Maybe in, a longer time frame, I'll think differently. I'm not quite sure. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But this was a really fun move for me in my collection and sort of taking a step more into vintage. Not necessarily your typical vintage pickups. A lot of people, at least in soccer vintage, don't seem to be all too into in-person autographs, and there's also something to be said about an action shot as well, not being people's favorite. But for me, all 3 of these were just massive cards for me and ones I was happy to go ahead and grab, especially considering, the sort of indexes and the general market and where it's at. Messi's at all-time highs. Pele is relatively beaten up. And, it was something I never really thought possible. I never really would have thought I could have grabbed 2 Pele Aquarella autos along with a Bremer and a PSA 7. It just didn't feel possible to me. And to be able to go ahead and make that happen is, something I'd gladly do again. And so that's my story on why I sold my only 71BIS and sort of where I've gone with it. I wanted to share it just to, sort of put my collecting journey out there a bit and show that, it's not always the worst to take profits and move it into something else, especially if you're passionate about what you're moving it into. It's never easy, it's always a little tricky and you got to battle with it in your head, but ultimately I feel like I did a pretty good job. And no matter your thoughts, good or bad, feel free to let me know down below. Everyone has their own opinions and I respect that. So, let me know what you think as well. In addition, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this as soon as they go live. Maybe not exactly like this. I don't know how often I'll be selling my only 71BIS, but nonetheless, hopefully enjoyed. And with that said, hopefully have a wonderful day, and peace.